So, tears are the lubricant of the soul. Let's talk about crying, weeping. Um, Generally, unless you're an actor, it's involuntary. And similarly, laughing is involuntary. And sometimes you laugh so hard you cry. So, what is that all about? Well, you've probably heard me say over and over and over, remembering your dreams is enhanced by writing them down and writing them down as a story, beginning, middle, and an end, right? This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Probably doesn't make any sense at all, but at least you then get the story in your head. The telling of the dream is really the experience that does what we call animates the dream, right? It gives it dimension, it gives it life, the telling of it. And when you tell it, you're telling it to someone who's listening. And particularly if you tell it to me, because that's what I do for a living. I listen. And I've done another video on listening. I think it's in IGTV. We won't go into that. But if you are truly listened to, there is then that human connection. And what happens over and over and over is that when people tell me a dream, they discover things in it that they didn't know were there. And usually the way they discover it is, oh, it has this emotional impact that's profound, that more often than not leads to tears. Because they've heard themselves in a way that, number one, is undeniable, and number two, is not about their story. It's not about where they think they are in life. It's none of that, right? It's an impact of an experience that's undeniable. So I'm just remembering this now, I recently listened to a dream that this client had written down and sent it to me in an email, which is what I ask people to do, so I can read it, so I can at least understand the story. Even though I make no judgments about anything in it, I get the story. And at one point in this somewhat complicated dream, there was this little girl sitting on a counter, just being there. And in the course of the dream, she takes a moment and says hello to the little girl, right? Okay. In her experience of remembering that dream and writing it down, the little girl was like not a particularly central part of the dream at all. She just happened to be there. In the telling of the dream, that little girl sitting on a counter waiting brought tears. Why? Because that little girl, I mean, the dream belongs to the dreamer, the person who had it, but that little girl was central to what she was dealing with. That little girl that waited, because that's what she was told to do. And is there something in there about a past memory and a pain of that? Yes, there is. But there's a reason that it's being put in a dream now, okay? Because now is the time when you can begin to understand what that was all about. I've talked about this before, but let me just sort of summarize it again. A lot of the stories that we have about ourselves, we developed a long time ago. We carry them into what we call the present or the now, okay? And as I've mentioned before, the past is just your current story about what happened, because that story changes. But you bring that past into your current story because now you're ready to have another perspective on it. We have this idea of wound in our culture, and we spend a lot of time in some therapeutic modalities, not all, but we spend a lot of time in some therapeutic modalities exploring all the dimensions of that wound. And that's not unuseful, but those aspects are going to come up as you progress through life, even if you understand all of them. And they appear at various points. Why? Because you have an understanding in a different context about what happened to you. It's not all the same, I was terrified of my dad when I was a little kid. Then I hated his guts when I was a teenager and a young man. And by the time he died, I talked to him 2 or 3 times a week, and we were very close. Same guy, except not the same guy. Memory changes. So you bring this little girl into your current moment to understand that experience in a different way. Because what happens is that, there's this sort of somewhat trite phrase that the wound is your greatest gift. It is, because you understand that aspect of the human experience and you can resonate with other people who have a similar aspect. I mean, it's no secret that first job I ever had was in a psychiatric hospital with kids from the age of 4 to 11 who had been abused 1,000 times worse than I ever had been. But I understood that. I knew that aspect of the human experience. And that's what you relive and refine and understand. And one of the ways you do that is not just up here. As a matter of fact, when it's just up here, it's not that useful. When you weep at your own story, it fills you with this sense of grace that not only did you survive that, but it shaped you into the human that you are. And that's the essence of being alive. That's the essence of growth. That's the essence of understanding your existence. So why do we say tears are the lubricant of the soul? Because it moves things. It moves you, right? I can't tell you how many times, and I have to say, well, I don't know. I was going to say this is more men than women, but I can think of some examples. Maybe that's not true. But people have an idea about what something is, okay? They have an idea about why they're in the situation they're in. And they certainly, in the beginning of working with me, they have an idea what this dream is about. I'm going to come in and present it, and this is what it is. Why? Because they don't want to weep. They don't want that experience. They don't even know that they don't want that experience, right? They want to understand it. They want to be in control of it. They want to make sense out of it. And that is not the point, And sometimes we have to spend a little time doing that to understand that that's not the point. The point is to experience the dream, because the dream has been created through an aspect of your human experience that is not cognitive, that doesn't care about your ego particularly, that does not looking to make sense in the context of the story you've got going right now. It's looking to inform you. And one of the ways it's going to inform you is to make you weep. Yeah. And now we get into the prohibition against weeping, right? Now, usually there's this idea, well, it's okay for women to cry, but not men. Well, it's actually not okay for women to cry, because when women cry, then we categorize them as weak and emotional and blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't, you probably don't, but the consensus reality is there, that crying is somehow a weakness. It's a loss of control. You've given up your cognitive awareness, you've lost control. And the fact of the matter is, you're in more control than ever when you weep, because there's a truth to it, I have to tell you, there are moments when I get into Facebook and scroll through these videos, and 9 times out of 10, there's something from, whatever Simon Cowell thing is going on. And there's some kid, the last one I watched was a 15-year-old kid came out, and he sang something from the Alleluia chorus. And he put everything he had into that song. And if it doesn't make you weep, there's something wrong with you, because that was that kid's truth. That was the essence of who he was in that moment. It was astonishing. And it's the same experience when you tell a dream to someone and you discover something in it you didn't know was there, and it makes you weep. That is tremendous power. That is tremendous vulnerability. That is tremendous imagination and understanding that whatever the circumstances of your life, whatever nonsense is going on financially and economically and all that kind of stuff, is it real? Yes, it's real, but it's not the truth, particularly where we are right now. So it's probably going to take another generation. I don't know how long it's going to take before we understand that weeping, crying, is really an act of grace, is really an act of power, is really an act of integration, and not something to be ashamed of or to look down on or to turn away from. It's something to be embraced, by all of us, because that's where we live. And that's what's going to save us. Yeah, that's what will save us. So it's not that I wish you to walk around weeping all day, but if the spirit moves you, don't sit on it. Don't do that to yourself. You rob yourself when you refuse to cry. So if you have dreams that you want to talk about and you're interested in this work, get in touch with me. We can set up a time to do that. And, I look at my statistics. It would be great if you subscribe to the channel. More people view these videos than our subscribers, and there's an algorithm thing and all that kind of stuff. So if this is useful to you, like it, subscribe to it. And if you can afford to, which is $5 a month, click on the link to my Patreon page. That really helps me out in terms of the time I use to put these things together. And I will talk to you soon. Stay safe. This is a tough, tough time right now in terms of the virus. And I think it is a model in some way for what we are going to deal with going forward. And I don't mean, it's all going to be awful and terrible, but there are going to be things that are going to be brought to the surface. They already are, that we're going to have to look at in a different way, because there's no way to go back to, the supposed new normal. But we'll get to that as we go along. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.